What is going on? What's happening? How are my fellow friends doing? I see that Rachel's here, Tamara's here. Good morning. It's actually the afternoon soon, in like a minute. So I guess you were right. You can say good morning right now, but you have like probably 15 seconds left. And then after that 15 seconds, you cannot say good morning no more because it'll be the afternoon on our new time at 12 p.m. I see that Malachi jumped on. I see that Isolay jumped on. Good morning. You can still say good morning now. Bummer. I was trying to be like, yo, it needs to be 12 o'clock. I feel like it's been 11:59 for like ever. Forever. There. No more good mornings. Good mornings are done. It's good afternoon. So good afternoon, friends. Jai jumped on. We're actually in our last week of our What I Really Want. Yes, we are coming to a close of one of your favorite series because you guys got to sing one of your favorite songs of I Want It That Way. So basically, you only have today to continue to talk about your song and talk or sing or text sing. Is that a thing? To text sing your favorite song. But I got a question for you guys, okay? And I'm going to need an answer for this question. And the question is this. I'm going to let you guys throw it in the chat. The question is this. What's up, Angelique? All right. The question is this. If you could only keep one, which one are you keeping, okay? If you could only keep one, which one are you keeping? So the first option is video games, okay? You can either just keep video games or Netflix or a streaming service, okay? So either video games or Netflix or a streaming service. What would you choose? Choose your character. Dun, 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 dun. We are castaways. You're keeping Netflix or streaming service? Bro, that's hard. I know, right? Video games, I'm sorry. Anime, that's wild. Streaming service, video games, Netflix. Hey, Ayumi. So, like, this is tough. I definitely know which one I'm going with. As much as I love playing video games, I can live without them. You know what I can't live without? Watching something. I mean, I probably could live without it, but if it's comparatively speaking, I couldn't live without that. I'm sorry. Right? You need your anime, man. I feel that. That's it's a big part of what we do. You feel me? Sorry, I'm just trying to bring up the video, and that seems like we're gonna have a problem. Sorry, guys. Just give me 1 second as you guys are throwing in your awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I'm fine with Netflix. Yeah, honestly, Netflix, they can go. But like, I don't know if I can give up like my Crunchyroll and my Funimation, you know? I don't know if I can give that up. Leader Aaron, which one are you going with? Are you going with you're keeping video games or you're keeping your streaming services?
Streaming services.
Right? Because like,
yeah, you can only play so much games in a time.
Right? Like there's so much shows that would like double up. Like think about it. No more Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Bro, I don't know.
And also you can do stuff while you're watching.
You can't do stuff while you're playing video games.
That's facts.
Aaron has solidified the answer. The answer has been solidified. And we are gonna jump in to our video. Hey Daniel, but we'll give it some time. I know the time change may have played with a couple of people where they're like, what? The backyard again. But our bottom line for today, and I'm gonna let you guys know this before we jump into the video, is giving into temptation doesn't have to be the end of the story, okay? And it's really good because ultimately, we wouldn't want to give into temptation, right? Like we want to be able to be strong enough to be like, yeah, we're going to fight off this temptation. We're going to be awesome. But like reality is sometimes we may break, sometimes we may crack. And it's good to not feel like that is the end of the world, that we did something super horrible that we cannot get any redemption for or anything like that. But we are going to jump right on in. So again, what I really want is for y'all to interact in the chat and watch this video. So let's watch this video.
So when I was younger, and it's 5 or 6 girls, and we were just like inseparable. And I remember we did everything together. We went to church together, we went to school together, we would hang out together on the weekends. I mean, we could not be pulled apart. And of course, that means that the more time we spent together, I'm sure if you know, a lot of you know this, we would sometimes get into like little arguments. Well, there was one girl who, she and I just kind of butted heads a lot. We were really close, but we didn't always see things the same way. And I remember this one time we got into this really, really intense argument to the point that she was yelling at me. And I didn't know how to take that because, you know, who likes to be yelled at, right? And I was so angry about it that later, when me and a couple of the other friends in the group were talking about it, I was tempted to just start saying things about her that I knew would be hurtful. And when you think about that idea and talking about people behind their back, you know, I knew at the time that like that's not just something that you do. And I was tempted to do it, but I knew that it had potential to damage. But I think that I was so angry in the moment that I just let it go. And I said something about her that was really, really hurtful to one of my other friends. Well, fast forward a couple days later to the next time that we all saw each other, and she came straight up to me and confronted me about it and said, "Did you say this about me?" And there I was, stuck. And I think the worst part of it was when I realized how much I had hurt her with the thing that I had said to my other friend. It ended up splitting up our group for a little while. We had one group of us that took my side, the other group of us that took her side, and it just became this big, big mess. And I'll never forget that. You know, sometimes we want things that aren't necessarily great for us in the long run. We call that temptation. Think of it like this. Temptation is the desire to do something we know might not be the best for us. As you get older, the kind of temptation you might be facing is so much more intense than the kind you dealt with when you were younger. Being tempted to take a cookie from the counter when your mom told you not to is small stuff compared to being tempted to cheat or steal or lie or make a choice that could have big and painful consequences. As you get older, a lot of our temptations get bigger, and so do the consequences. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe the temptation you gave into wasn't the same as mine, but you probably know the feeling. You've given in and done something you knew wasn't good for you. And then, well, like me, you were probably wondering, what do I do next? Maybe we feel stuck after we've given into temptation. We're stuck with feelings of guilt and embarrassment and defeat and shame. We worry what people will think if they find out what we've done. And if people do find out, we fear they'll never see us the same way again. Or maybe the opposite is true for us. We've heard all this stuff about how giving into temptation can be bad or wrong or awful, but if we're honest, we don't feel any of that. We don't really feel guilty at all. Maybe it's because we don't think what we did was wrong. Or maybe because we've been doing it for so long, we don't even know the difference anymore. Or maybe because everybody else acts like it isn't a big deal, we feel the same way. And whatever the reason, giving into temptation doesn't feel all that bad to us. Or maybe we get upset. We might blame other people for what we did. After all, that's easier than taking responsibility ourselves, right? Our friends made us do it. Our teacher gave us way too much to study for the test. That's a stupid rule we had to follow anyway. We look to blame everyone else but ourselves when we give in to a temptation. Maybe we try to hide what we did. We want to cover it up. We avoid the person who's upset with us. We make excuses for what we did or where we were. We might even lie to deny the whole thing. We will do whatever it takes to make sure nobody finds out. Why? Because we know what we did was wrong and we don't want to face the fallout. Each and every one of these feelings or responses when we give into temptation is normal. They're things we all might do, but the reality is they don't make things better. In fact, dealing with temptation in these ways usually makes things worse. So what do we do? When we've given into temptation, how are we supposed to respond? To start over, to change the path we're on? When it comes to temptation, what's the best thing we can do once we've given in?
Well, to help us figure that out, we're going to talk about a guy named David. Believe it or not, David was one of the biggest heroes in the Bible. He lived before Jesus came to earth, and his story is documented in the part of the Bible called the Old Testament. Now, when we first meet David, he was just a shepherd boy, just a little boy. But by the time his story was through, God called him to so much more. He eventually became king, and God said he was a man after my own heart. That's pretty huge. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear all that, I think this David guy must have had it all together. He probably lived right, he never made mistakes, and he never gave in to the kind of temptations that would mess up the good things he had going on. But that's not exactly how David's story went. When David was king over Israel, he was doing a really great job. He was winning a ton of battles. His kingdom was growing and his people really liked him. Basically, this dude was the greatest of all time, the GOAT. But things changed on one fateful night. David couldn't sleep, so he got up out of bed and wandered to the roof. And then he noticed a beautiful woman named Bathsheba bathing across the way. Okay, now I know it's getting a little PG-13 up in here. So when he saw Bathsheba, what did David do? I mean, this was a man after God's own heart. He was the chosen king of Israel and a leader everyone loves. So obviously he walked away, went back into his room, and nothing bad happened, right? Wrong. David actually invited Bathsheba over to hang out, and well, they gave into some temptations they definitely shouldn't have, especially since Bathsheba wasn't David's wife. In fact, she was actually married to someone else completely, a man named Uriah who was out fighting in David's army. Talk about the drama. So after all this, did David tell anyone about what happened with Bathsheba? Did he apologize or try to make it right? No. He just pretended like it never happened. And for a while, that seemed to work. But then Uriah came home and things got complicated. See, David was overcome with guilt and afraid Uriah would find out what happened. So David started doing what so many of us do when we give into temptation. He tried to keep his mistake a secret. He went so far as to have Uriah sent back out to the battle so that he might be killed and this whole thing would just go away. So just to keep this whole mess straight, temptation led David to sin with Bathsheba. Then the guilt, fear, and shame he felt led him to order the killing of Bathsheba's husband. Not good, right? David knew what he did was wrong. He knew he was making mistake after mistake after mistake, but he kept going. Why would he do that? Well, I think it was because David believed he had no way out. Maybe he thought he was stuck in the mess he'd made. He just didn't know how to change the story. And in the middle of that, David also felt really distant from God. We know that because he actually wrote about it in a passage from the book of Psalms in the Bible. There, David wrote that he felt a lot of the same feelings that I know I feel when I struggle with temptation. He used phrases like crushed and cast out and joyless to describe it. Is anybody with me? But here's what we also know to be true about David's story. It didn't end there. God didn't give up on him. He didn't abandon him. He didn't throw his hands in the air and say, well, David, you gave in to temptation. There's nothing I can do with you now. So that's it. David actually did a lot of great things after this part of his story. But in order to really go on with his life, David had to do one thing. He had to ask for God's forgiveness. In one of the Psalms, David wrote this prayer asking for God's forgiveness. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. In other words, David prayed this: forgive me of my sins, God. Forgive me for giving into something I knew wasn't good for me. Help me get over the guilt I feel over what I've done. Change my heart. Help me to want to follow your ways instead of my own. Now, David still had to face some major consequences from those bad choices. But because he had forgiveness, he could walk forward without fear or guilt or shame holding him down anymore. He knew his story could start again, and the same can be true for us. See, giving into temptation doesn't have to be the end of the story. We don't have to stay stuck in the choices we've made or the feelings we feel because of them. Forgiveness was the key for David, and it's the key for you and me too. I told you a story of a friend who I said some pretty nasty things about. And what was really good was that it didn't end there. See, we're still friends to this day. And it's because in that moment when she confronted me and said, did you say this about me? The only thing I could do was to say, yes, and I am so sorry. Obviously, that's not really how I feel about you. Obviously, that was something that I should not have done. I was just tempted in the moment, and I just owned it. I just owned up to her, and in humility, in the best way that I knew in my 14-year-old self, I said, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And thankfully, she had enough grace. Not immediately. She was still pretty upset, but eventually she had enough grace to say, I forgive you, and I love you, and we're still cool. You see what I mean? Giving into temptation doesn't have to be the end of the story. And that's because of forgiveness. So if you found yourself wondering what to do next, if you're struggling with guilt or fear or shame after giving into a temptation, if you're finding yourself making mistake after mistake after mistake, well, a different story is possible. And here's how it starts. First, ask God for forgiveness. Go to God just like David did. Confess what it is that you're struggling with. Tell him about how it's made you feel. Ask for God's help to change your story and ask for his forgiveness. Remember, there's nothing that can separate you from God's love, and there's nothing he won't offer you his forgiveness for. So start by walking forward today and asking him for it. And then ask others to forgive you. Asking God for forgiveness is the most important step in moving forward, but making things right with others is important too. When we make poor choices, it often affects those around us. And part of moving on and moving forward is taking responsibility for the mistakes that we've made. When you disobey your parents, you need to admit what you did and ask them to forgive you. When you've lied to a friend, you need to ask for forgiveness. When you've spread that rumor you knew wasn't true, you need to be honest and ask for forgiveness. It's not fun, but it's important. And it's part of what will help you move on. And next, forgive yourself. Sometimes this can be the hardest step to take. Even when you know God has forgiven you and you've heard a friend say, I forgive you, you can't seem to forgive yourself. You beat yourself up and you worry that you'll mess up again. And when you get stuck here, keep reminding yourself of God's forgiveness. Ask for his help to remember that your story isn't over. And then make a new plan. If you don't want to find yourself in the same situation in the future, you've got to figure out what to do differently now. You've got to make a new plan to avoid that temptation. And that might mean making some tough choices, like not hanging out with certain friends, or having your parents put restrictions on your phone or your computer, or not listening to certain music, or asking to sit in a different seat in class. Whatever you need to do, do it. Make a new plan and consider telling somebody like your group leader about it. Ask them to help you stick to that plan and encourage you as you do. And remember, giving into temptation doesn't have to be the end of the story. You got this.
And we're back. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that. I gotta pause it on this side or I was just gonna loop. But we're going to jump right in. Wow. Let me pause. Let me start again. We're going to jump right on in to our questions. And actually, no, we're not. Psych. I gotcha. But we're going to jump into our memory verse, okay? Not memory verse, but the verse that was emphasized today. And that can be found in Psalms 5. Wow. Psalms 51. Sorry, guys. I'm having a hard time today, especially with reading. But it's found in Psalms 51, verse 9 to 10. And it says this. It says, don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain off my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. And I love this verse because, especially with our bottom line today, and as we're talking about how just because you fall into temptation, it doesn't mean it's the end of your story. It doesn't mean that it's the be all end all. And now you are a horrible person forever and you will never be able to get over. I said all of those words and never be ever. Like that was wild. But means that you'll never be able to get over that. That's not the case here. And that's an amazing thing because we have a God who's gracious. We have a God who is forgiving. And just like this verse says, it's talking about creating us a clean heart. So yes, there will be times where we'll mess up and we'll fall short and we'll fall into temptation. But it's really onus on us that in those moments, what are we doing after that? Okay. Are we creating ourselves a clean heart? Are we renewing our spirit to now realign back to who Jesus is and asking for that forgiveness, because he's more than willing to actually give that forgiveness. Okay. But I want you guys to do this. Okay. Think of a character in a movie who did something they knew they shouldn't have done. Okay. Just giving you time to think about it. Think about it. Think about it. One more time, just for good luck. Think about it. All right. Now, what happened after that? Okay. What happened after they knew they did something that they shouldn't have done? Okay. I'll give you some time to throw it in the chat. But like usually, if you need a little help, this is usually what we call the climax of movies or TV shows or TV series. Like in this moment where they did something they knew they weren't supposed to do and realized it, it's usually the climax and like it's about to go down. Yeah, they died. Whoa, that went really south really quick. A whole war. She got in trouble by her mom. They died. Why do I even bother? What the heck? Piper, you good? Just gotta check on you, make sure that you're good. Make sure that you're blessed and everything. But yeah, there's a lot of things. And for a majority of it, yeah, right? Like someone that literally went south. Someone was like, death happened, okay? That's what happens when you do something that you weren't. And like, sometimes that may happen in movies and stuff like that. But usually it's not a good outcome, is it? It's always a, yo, Cyree! Jeez. But yeah, usually it's not a good reaction, or it's not a good outcome whenever they realize that they do this. Death of multiple characters. Okay, yeah, we're trying to see how dark we can get. That's wild. But it's usually not a positive thing. It's usually not, oh my gosh, they come out saving the whole world. It's usually never like that. Okay, but moving on to the second question. That was really just a question for fun. How might someone feel after they do something they know they shouldn't do? Okay, how might someone feel knowing after they do something that they shouldn't do? How would you, not you, because you guys don't do that, but how would they feel? I know they might feel like, dang, maybe guilt. Guilt would probably be a big one, right? Where they're like, I feel pretty guilty about this. Good or bad. Yeah. I can see that. They could feel guilty and sad about a lot of different emotions. Well, thank you, Tamara Moore. We understand. But do you want to give me an emotion? I'm just kidding. Try one, maybe two. Definitely guilty. Okay, and Daniel's still on the fact that it went dark. Confused is a good one. Yeah, guilty, but she was mad at her mom. I mean, Daniel, you're the one who's still on the dark and how it went dark quick. So, but yeah, there's a lot of emotions, and I really enjoy who said it. Isolate said good or bad. Sometimes it can even be both, right? We're like, again, I find we always go back to this analogy or thought, but like, I want to have ice cream before dinner, and I know my mom says, no, you're not allowed to have ice cream before dinner, but I slap a whole like bowl of ice cream before dinner. Yo, you best believe in that moment after, I'm not going to be like, oh, this was the worst thing ever. Nah, fam, I'm going to be happy because I just whacked off a whole bowl of ice cream. Like, ice cream is nice. It probably tasted amazing, especially if it was like Rolo ice cream with the little Rolo pieces in it. Yo, those smack. Okay, those are booming. Or the Smarties ones with the little Smarties in it. Yo, those ones are expensive, but yo, when you treat yourself once in a while, they're nice. But I'm not gonna be upset. I'm gonna feel pretty nice. I'm gonna be like, yeah, I should do this more often. I should have ice cream more often before dinner. This is a good appetizer. But then as like the night goes on and I actually now have to eat dinner, but I have no space, and say my mom made like my favorite food ever, and now I have my favorite food ever on this plate, and I'm not able to eat it because I'm full because I had ice cream. And now I'm like stuffing my face, and now later on that night, I'm not gonna feel too good because I filled up on ice cream and not the actual food that I needed. And then 5 years down the road, I'm still going to be 5'4" because I didn't fill my body with nutrients. You see how this snowballs here, but that's not the point. The point is, in that moment, it can feel great and it can feel fantastic, but it can also feel bad at the same time. You can enjoy the ice cream and still feel guilty in that moment, or feel guilty after that moment. So all that to say, there's a lot of different emotions that someone can feel after they do something they know they're not supposed to do. And that's why we're talking right now. Because back to our bottom line, giving into temptation doesn't have to be the end of the story. Okay? So with that being said, I want to share with you guys, don't let it be the end of the story. I know it sounds pretty self-explanatory. You're like, but Pastor Shay, you literally just repeated the bottom line. And I did repeat it because it's important, and it's important to know. And I'm going to repeat the verse that we talked about because that is also really key and really important, I feel, in helping kind of jog our minds whenever we kind of slip and fall into that temptation and end up not being so strong, or not being able to just punch back at that temptation. And the verse is this again. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create me a clean heart. Oh God, renew a loyal spirit within me. I would hope and I would encourage you guys that if you do fall into temptation and you do something, I said do. Ooh. But if you guys do end up doing, see how I avoided it there, something where you fell into temptation, no matter the scale, it can be from something small, it can be something as ginormous as the space in between my hands right now. But wherever you find yourself on that spectrum, understand that you can go right back to this verse and kind of help yourself realign back to who Jesus says you are and not what temptation makes you feel like. Sounds good? Sounds good. Wow, I'm so immature. It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm the immature one, and I'm still talking about that's crazy. That's wild. But I'm going to give you guys the last question in hopes that you guys remember it on Wednesday, okay? Remember it on Wednesday because I'm going to ask, and I know you guys are still going to look at me with blank faces. So write it down. Put it in your phones. Put it in a notebook, a journal. Write down the question and think about it. And the question is this. What's one thing you never want to forget about dealing with temptation? Because we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that on Thursday. So again, when no one is actually up, right? And then you call me immature when you're not even listening. It's crazy. It's crazy. But again, the question is this. What's one thing you never want to forget about dealing with temptation? So we're going to talk about that question. We're going to break it down. We're going to break it down a little bit more and dive in on Wednesday, probably play a couple games. But that is what's going to happen. Guys and girls, thanks for joining. And we're going to pray us out. And I hope that you guys have a good rest of your Sunday afternoon. Whoa, did you see how I almost said morning, but caught myself? All right, let's pray. Dear God, I thank you, Lord, that we are able to journey along these past 4 weeks and talk about temptation, Lord. Talk about how temptation is a thing that all of us face, all of us go through, Lord. We talked about that temptation isn't the sin, but actually acting on the temptation is the sin, Lord. We talked about how even Jesus was tempted and how he helps us be able to fight and have the strength to push back on temptation. And Lord, today, as we're ending off our series, Lord, we're learning that even if we do fall into that temptation, Lord, that it's not the end of our story, God, and that we should just as the psalm says, Lord, run back to you, realign ourselves to who you are, creating ourselves a clean heart, a pure heart, Lord, and just changing our mindset, Lord. Because just because we fail, just because we mess up, doesn't mean that we become horrible people who are not worthy of a relationship with you or worthy to talk to you, Lord. But just simply, Lord, that we just have a little bit of adjustments to do, Father. And Lord, I thank you, Lord, for every single student, Lord, as they finish school this year and they enter in the summer, Lord. I pray, Lord, that, Lord, you would let them have tons of fun, that they would be able to safely hang out with friends, safely be able to do things, God, and just be able to enjoy and maximize their summer to the fullest. So we thank you for all of these things in your name. Amen. Amen. I'm now tempted to eat my dad's ice cream. Don't do it. Don't act on that temptation. You feel me? But awesome, guys. I will see you all on Wednesday at 6:30, and you will have that question in the forefront of your mind because we will talk about it. We will talk about it. But see you on Wednesday, friends. Have a great rest of your day and have a great first week of summer.